So a bit about our company and how we've sort of devised this, what I like to call series of webinars. We sort of find these techniques and tools that we've taken and developed over literally years, and wanted to share with everyone. And we know that we sort of know what works for us very well. And we find that when you take a bit more of a holistic approach on what property development is and where you add value, it makes it a lot easier to find the right prospects for you. So myself and Saul sit on the finding and the structuring funding. Saul does assist Ben in some forms of delivery and planning when it comes from an operations perspective, but Ben is really the brainchild and the work behind that process thereon. One thing that we think is key, and why we want to share this information, is we believe that you can make margins on every process throughout a property development cycle. So you may find it, structure it, get planning, and then sell it on. You may take a scheme on with planning, deliver it, and sell it better than others most. But what you have to understand is your competitive advantage. So we always try and add a margin on all these stages. The best schemes you'll find you take from, all from full end fine to sales. But this is just to give you a bit of an overview when it comes to questioning. If you do have any questions or how our business is set up, what areas we focus on and almost have like a laser focus on at that stage. How can we structure this better? How can we structure this with different types of finance? How could the design improve our delivery and save us cost savings? Or how are we delivering this to make the appropriate sales product? So it's understanding the process throughout rather than just going for the most and maximum square footage, which may cost more and have less of a profit. So these are the products as a business we offer. So we have worked on pretty much all of these platforms so far. So we are project managing, and we've sourced for other individuals. Some are armchair investors, some are other developers. We assist, so we come on board and work alongside individuals to make sure the best is from their asset or their funds. We work with investment, which you'll see at points in these slides that we've worked with. Happy to collaborate, so to combine expertise and do maybe slightly larger projects or projects that are in a better location for you or us. And then finally, just the source part, we do pass on other property projects, and that will probably come at a later webinar of why we source on deals, but we think it's key for cash flow of a growing business. So if you have any questions at any point throughout this call, it is an interactive webinar, so we want to make it as suitable for you as possible. So please feel free to fire any questions across. The best way to do it is put it in the chat box and we'll come round to you. We may come round to it in the presentation and we'll let you know if we will. If not, we'll probably answer it there and then on the spot.
Cool.
Which brings us into a bit of an overview of what we're up to at the minute.
Yeah, thanks. So we've mentioned earlier that we've sort of transacted on about 7 properties in the last 12 months. I'm going to talk you through a few of those, and then we'll go into a bit more detail on sort of how we stacked on those properties and what offers we made to be successful with those wins. So the first project that we bought was actually March last year. It was in Spencer's Wood, Reading. It's currently a mixed use site. So at the rear, underneath the little undercroft that you can see in the top photo, there is a 2,000 square foot office stroke store unit. The front building is segregated into 4 studio flats and 7 small office units at the front. So we sort of looked at this from a development perspective. We knew that there were potential planning uplift to be had. But we bought it on the premise that if we were to fill the space, because it was part vacant, if we refurbished and filled the space that was there without extending any footprint, we could still make a profit on that scheme. So we did take it through planning, and we did a pre-app and spoke to the parish council beforehand, before even purchasing the property. So we were confident that it was de-risked as much as it possibly could be, and that planning shouldn't be an issue. We did get planning within the first 3 months of owning the property. We've now got an extension to the front building to turn the offices into 3 flats, and we are extending the office unit, like the bottom picture, to extend that to a 3,200 square foot grade A office space. So we'll have 7 flats in the front 6 little office units in the back, and this should be a nice income generating property for us. So we'll sell the 3 flats and hold the rest of the site because they're high yielding. Project on the right is one you've probably seen a lot from us, and you will be seeing in the next couple of weeks a bit more, because this is a crowdfunded project that we have literally finished in the last couple of weeks, and it went on the market today. So it's a disused basement area. So that bottom boarded up section of the ground floor is actually sort of lower ground level. We've converted that space into 2 flats. We lowered the ground slab. We introduced some light wells out the front to let light into the space. And that was crowdfunded via Crowd with Us. So we actually raised £350,000. It was fully funded around Christmas time or January. We completed in January. We started works on the 20th of January, and by the 23rd of June, so 5 months later, we're on the market. Put them on the market about 2 hours ago, and we've got 4 viewings at the end of this week already. So great success on that project, and hopefully they fly off the shelf. So this is what it was. It was a, like I said, derelict basement area. We had to break up the existing slab to get decent ceiling heights in there. If you want to move on to the next photos. And this is the end product. So 2 2-bed flats, great for young professionals, really stylish interiors. We hope to see these go pretty swiftly. A final project that I just want to run through that we've got ongoing at the moment. We're actually in the process of selling this. We bought it as a former police office. We got planning permission to turn it into 3 houses and a small office. We pre-agreed a sale for the small office to a local charity, and we've agreed the sale of the whole site to a local developer to develop, and we are about 2 weeks away from completing on that sale. So for us, getting some cash in the business is important at this time. We had an offer from a local developer that we couldn't refuse, and we're happy to shift this one on with just planning uplift and take the cash to move on to the next project. So our pipeline, we've talked about on previous webinars about assisted sales and all the good work that we're doing with sort of joint venture opportunities, getting direct to vendors and negotiating an agreement between them to come on board as a design and delivery partner. So we don't actually purchase the property. We come on board to take it through planning, project manage everything, market the units at the end, and share in the profit that is generated from that. So just an idea of the things we've got coming up. We are about to finalise the legal agreement for a 5-bedroom house split into 2 3-bed houses in Hampshire. We've got 2 offers that have been accepted on a detached bungalow and a semi-detached property, which we're looking to knock down and rebuild duplicate of. We've got a 5-unit scheme in Henley, which we are working on an assisted sale perspective. We've got a 5-unit scheme in Canterbury, which is a mixed-use commercial ground and basement with 3 floors of uppers, which we're converting into 5 flats. And we've got a 4-storey property in Pimlico, which again we're direct to the vendor of, and we are working on an assisted sale arrangement where we deliver the scheme for a profit share. And also we're looking to do design and build contracts in Oxfordshire. We've got a good team of contractors around us. There's no reason why we can't do work for other people and just project manage that process for some cash flow into the business, which is always key. So lots going on. Total pipeline of about 13 million, and hopefully those can be delivered within the next 18 months.
Thanks, Ben. Everything always seems to take a bit longer in the property process, but hopefully in the next 18 months. So over to me and a bit more about how we analyse projects from the outset, really. The way that we saw this most beneficial to hopefully to the listeners is to not go line by line on our spreadsheet and tell you what we cost things at, because in reality, everything changes per site. So on some sites, you may need different assessments to others, and there's going to be obviously bespoke stacking per one. So we're trying to give you the the fundamentals of what we try and stick by, to give you the sort of the nous to go about and stack many deals with a slightly better stance, and to hopefully make, because realistically, when you're stacking a project, you want to try and create it in a way that you can pay as much as possible and find a deal that works for you, because it is competitive out there, and you need to know, what that margin is. Before we go into this, the best way I think to learn how to stack projects is just to get on and do it, and maybe speak to people and share it to people. So at any point, if you want for any of our team to look at one of your stacks, or look at, review your pricing on a site, we're more than happy to do so. So one thing that's key from our perspective is we always work backwards. So funnily enough, there's many things in a stack which change quite often, and there's many things which never change really that quickly at all. So your profit margin, you should always aim for the same sort of profit margin. That might change for who you are and what you're looking for. Our profit margin for development flips and turnarounds is about 20% on GDV. These projects tend to average 12 to 18 months. So that, you may have different returns that you're looking for. For example, if you're buying a mixed use building and you're looking to hold flats, and you're looking at a 10-year scheme, and you'd be happy with a 10% per year, that may change how you analyze a project. So we always have a rough indication of 20% on GDV. We have some investor partners who have expectations greater and smaller than that. So then we depict where it goes. But with all of our projects, we bring them in-house, we analyze them, then we start thinking about who to do them with. So working backwards from the end value, so GDV is the gross development value of the site, which is basically what is it going to sell for at the end. So that's the apartments that you're selling, that's the rooms that you're letting and what they're commercially worth, that's what the bank value it at. All of these things you need to take into consideration. We work backwards, so subtract our profit, subtract our build costs, subtract professional costs, finance costs, and any other costs. So a lot of people miss off some costs in their spreadsheets, but if this deal costs you money elsewhere and you haven't got it on your spreadsheet, but that's a cost that's being missed. So it needs to be incorporated in it. So even if we put our own funds into a project, we will charge a fee for that, because we want to make sure that our finance is working just as hard as it would if it was somewhere else working on a different project. So it's key to work backwards. And the reason I said at the beginning, some of these things change. Profit is a percentage value, so that's always going to be the same. Your GDVs may take a little bit of time, but once you've got a good, robust gross development value on that project, you shouldn't need to revisit that much once you've scrutinized it and can now work backwards. Your build is evidently going to be completely bespoke to the project that you're doing, and you have to first of all run off fair estimations. Then you may go to tender. You may get secondary advice from a builder or someone like our business, or a quantity surveyor. Professional costs tend to be a good rule of thumb of the same. The only things I would say about professional costs is certain assessments that are also bespoke to the site. So this could be, ground contamination surveys, this could be daylight surveys, things like that, which may not be for every project, but maybe for some. So even though they are fairly straightforward to put a guesstimate on what they're going to cost, you need to make sure you've got all the right assessments integrated in there. Finance costs don't tend to change that much. Once you get a flavour of what it's going to cost you to do a deal, you can sort of reciprocate that throughout the deals. We have a hard and fast rule that if we assume investor finance is at about 15% and a blended rate of senior debt finance is about 10% per annum, we can then draw up a spreadsheet from there. So any other cost, it can be anything. It could be the setting up the special purchase vehicle. It could be accountant's fees to setting that up. It could be literally anything that falls inside this specific project, put it into the stack, because if it's costing you money, you want to make sure you get a return on that money. So once you have all those costs taken off the end value, the GDV, you're then left with either the land value or the asset value. Now, one thing I want to reiterate at this point, which I think is key, just because that figure comes out in your spreadsheet doesn't mean that it's got to be offensive to whoever's receiving it. And it doesn't mean that value is the highest value of the property. And what I mean by that is it might have a higher value for someone that's not going to develop it. So it's sometimes your job to straddle and sort of understand like a benchmark of what you think it's worth, and then work back through it as if it's not a development. So the project that Ben mentioned in Spencer's Wood, if we got planning for residential all over the site and every square footage was residential, the asset would be worth way more. But in actual fact, the conversion cost for us to do commercial to resi is in existing footprint, and keep some commercial is a lot lower. So therefore, the asset value is slightly higher because all of our costs that are coming off aren't dictating the land value for that. One of our most important tools for stacking is we do use Google Drive. You can see here that Ben's, so this is a spreadsheet that I was doing the other day, and Ben's online with a spreadsheet. We've got an anonymous squirrel there, which is basically what Google does if it doesn't have the individual logged in as an editor. But basically all this software does is it makes it collaborative. So you have one live master document per stack. So let's say you start up a new project, you make a new stack, you can all twist and change this stack at the same time, review it, and there's never any confusion. It's a very efficient way of working. You can sort of tweak it as you go. It makes sure that there's no duplicates of the documents, so you don't know which ones are superseded and which ones are to date. And it's an extremely way to collaboratively get from A to B, and B is understanding what you need to offer. You can also share these spreadsheets so people can't edit them. So for example, if we want to share this with an agent or an investor or a partner maybe, we're happy to share this spreadsheet so they can view it but not share it.
And another benefit is it's free.
Yeah, that's very true. So Google Drive is free.
Yeah.
And it also integrates with Gmail. Thanks all. So another thing we do, and I haven't actually seen anyone else do this, but once we've got an overview of the stack, we then make duplicate tabs, which basically create different scenarios so that we can understand how and when and at what price we go for this project. And the reason that's key is because you will see later on in the presentation when we're discussing our offer process, sometimes you don't understand the vendor's expectations or reasoning, or whether they're time motivated or money motivated. So we always put two offers to the table, and one's normally a quicker, cheaper offer. The other's normally a much greater offer, which takes a bit of time for us to add value before we purchase it. So this is great for duplicating all of the data and then changing the cells to make it relevant. So certain tabs that we may have is we have a worst case scenario. This is what banks and investors want to see. We'll have a stress test 10% off GDV tab. So we'll knock off 10% and see how robust this deal is to really do. We have external buyers. This might be if we take it on, get planning and sell it on to someone else. We have subject to planning offers. We have assisted sale tab. So an assisted sale tab is basically a developments tab. If you don't know what assisted sale is, it's basically where you joint venture with the landowner or the homeowner. So it's basically the same as a development tab, but we remove stamp duty and land tax. We reduce all of the inertia costs of taking on the site. We reduce the holding costs of the bank finance, depending on how that structure is. So you can quite easily flick between any of these tabs and understand exactly what is the best way for your business to be taking on this project. Once you've got all of those set up, we drag them into the summary tab, which is this one here, so that you can see on a summary which is best and the best returning for your scheme. So once you have all that information, drag it into the summary tab. You'll have all the information. You can tweak the prices, tweak the levels, and play with the offer to know exactly what entry level you're going in at. So to give you an idea of these tabs and how they may be useful, we've got a case study which Ben's going to go to detail and further, which is the Spencer's Wood project.
Yeah, so this is the mixed use site in Spencer's Wood in Reading. These tables are basically us kind of analysing the different scenarios that we might offer on and which ones work. I mentioned earlier that we made the offer. It was a strong offer based on the fact that with the full occupancy, i.e. sort of table number one, you can see there that the commercial value that we estimated by filling the space. So we had pretty much 50% of it full, but there were lots of units that weren't let. So by spending a bit of marketing money and spending 6 months getting the tenancies in line and getting new tenants, we could actually bring the value up to just under £1 million. So we bought it for 786, all in fees for about 850. So just by giving a bit of TLC on the marketing front and getting the vacant spaces rented, we could actually add value that way as a fallback position. So we were fairly confident in going in with a higher offer. The fact that we had we de-risked it further by getting a pre-planning application carried out before we even purchased the property was sort of our own sort of risk mitigation, just to make sure that we weren't having to hold the asset in the sort of worst case scenario, and that we could add future value as well. So we'll always look at the different opportunities. The first one being the full occupancy. The second one basically refurbishing the whole space. So the full occupancy, number one, was basically just renting it as it was. The full studio flats are very tired, do need a lick of paint and new bathrooms, kitchens, and the office needs a bit of a touch up. But even renting it on lower values and bringing it to full occupancy still generated a healthy return and incoming rental asset. The refurbishment option was, again, not getting any planning approvals, but just tarting everything up, giving everything a new lick of paint, new kitchen, new bathrooms, achieving the higher rentals because of that. Gave us obviously a higher GDV. And then we analysed the full planning options, which, as I said, we had a good idea of what was possible before even purchasing the site, because we did a pre-app and we had spoken to the parish council. So we knew that we know a lot of people that did view this property thinking that the office unit could be converted under PD into flats. It's within a catchment area for Aldermaston Atomic Weapons Discharge Zone, which means that PD rights have been removed. So a lot of people saw this asset and walked away from it because they couldn't get the PD option. And because we understand commercial property and how yield calculations work, how commercial tenants operate, we were comfortable moving this forward, knowing that there wasn't any PD at the back and we would have to go into full planning to get that extra uplift. Next slide. So those were sort of the routes that we predicted in terms of our stack and our offer, and we were comfortable that in the worst case scenario, we were still profitable with this scheme. The reality was that because the planning risk, we took the extra planning risk and got the uplift. Within 3 months, we had the planning approval through. We actually went from, even on our high estimates of 1.91 million, we did get a valuation pre-COVID of just shy of 2.1 million. So that's because we worked off of worst case scenarios, and we always like to be conservative. But in reality, if you're over delivering, then it's only a good thing for yourself and your investors. And I think I explained a little bit more about it on the next slide in terms of how we always take contingencies, be conservative with pretty much every part of the process. So looking at our GDV, stress testing, like Jack mentioned earlier, a 5%, 10% stress test on the GDV. The timelines are something that always gets pushed out, and I think COVID's been a big highlighter of that, in that everything takes longer. The program definitely will slip, so you have to allow for that. Oh, sorry. Just mute you. And with build costs, everyone should be putting a contingency in their figures. Now, depending on the project, will depend on the level of contingency. For new builds, I would typically be taking about 5%. With new builds, there are a lot less unforeseen. So as soon as you're out of the ground, it should be a relatively straightforward process. If you've got listed buildings, for example, or you're in a conservation area where you're working with period properties and older properties, your contingency should probably be higher than the 10% I've suggested there. So it really does depend on a case-by-case project. But all of these figures will tend to base on a worst case scenario, so that if anything does go wrong, we've stress tested it and we understand the the variance that will have in our scheme. And in reality, things should go a lot better than what we've stacked before purchase. Once you have purchased and got through the legal process, that's the time when you start to really streamline everything and try to squeeze more value out of the asset, and bring your build costs down, as well as trying to improve your GDV by sweating the asset a little bit more. So always look at extra contingencies, worst case scenarios, and then work in a more productive way from that. One thing that we always do is always check our stacks together. So say Jack finishes one stack, probably Saul and myself will take a look at that and we'll run through it on a line by line item basis before making an offer, just to make sure that we haven't missed anything. So one of the tools that we use, I mean, Zoom's fantastic. That's what we're on at the moment. And it is an amazing piece of technology. Loom Video is the one that we use most to screen record. So this is a screenshot of me essentially running through our stack analysis to one of our joint venture partners. So this is actually an assisted sale project. And it's far easier for me to explain over a 5-minute screen share video session than it is to just send over a PDF with loads of figures for them to run through. A lot of the vendors that we're working with on an assisted sale basis or on a joint venture basis won't know the first thing about property development. You send them a spreadsheet with lots of figures, lots of information that they've never heard of before, it's just going to freak them out. So as long as if you can be a bit more personal and use things like Loom Video to explain the process, talk them through the scheme, talk them through the figures, it's going to help you from an investor point of view, a joint venture point of view, and get your message across a hell of a lot quicker and more clearly.
We love this software, and we've got quite a funny story of one time Ben spent about 45 minutes doing quite a complicated video and analysis, and then both Ben and I travelled to the site, which was a direct to vendor site. I had probably 2.5 hour drive, and Ben had about an hour drive. Got there, and the couple that were meeting us at 9 a.m. on Saturday morning just hadn't looked at the Zoom link, which was like, hey, watch this before we come on Saturday. So we just got there and just watched it with them. It was quite comical, but really useful software. It certainly saves a lot of time. So back over to me and sort of analysing once. So I hope you've got a fair view on how to go about analysing your deal, which isn't just too quantitative as it were, with just throwing you out line by line Excel. But I think the most important thing to get a deal done and plays a huge part in offering is not just your numbers, finding out what the vendor wants, so the vendor's motives. Once they understand, see if you can work with them and find a way that it benefits you and them, understanding their problems, finding a solution and creating a win-win. We found on many occasions that when you find out this information, you can actually structure a deal that's better than before you knew this information, than just a straight sort of outright value that you send over to the agent or whatever it may be. Basically, the more you know about the prospect and the drivers, the better. So we shared this on one of our other presentations, which was the assisted sale one, and I mentioned it at the beginning of this call. So we pretty much always have a dual offer process, and it's basically an unconditional or a conditional purchase. In this particular scenario, this is our offer letter. There is a subject to planning condition, but it doesn't have to just be a subject to planning. It can be timelines, exchange delay completion, vendor financing, joint venture, obviously subject to planning. It could be change of use. We've just submitted an offer through, it was actually last week, which was a change of use condition. So there's many ways that you can structure the conditional offer. And what it basically means is once you put the scheme into a stack and then build one option and a second option, bless you, Bushra, I saw you sneeze there, you can actually see the difference in price, what you can pay as if you're adding value to something. So what we try and do is go, okay, they can have a quick, speedy, good terms, unconditional offer, but our offer is going to be much lower because one, it's more risky, two, we can't add value to it or de-risk it as such. And then the second offer is the money one. It's the big lumpy money, which we can tend to offer more if we get planning. So to give you an example of how that may work, the police station that we offered on, the police station was on the market for about 650 grand. We knew that if we bought that site, split the house, split the office, and sold it back on, we would get about 650 back. So our worst case purchase was 460 grand. We knew we could buy it, get a bank involved, fail in planning, which is key, all the costs of fail in planning, get the bank fees in, do all the planning, hold the site for 12 months, split it, refurbish and sell it, and recoup all our costs. So that was our unconditional, just go in, have a crack at planning, see how we get on. Our conditional offer would have been the scheme that we've achieved now, but we would have got it on their ownership. So they would have still owned the site. We'd have bought it conditional to getting that planning. So it's key to know that we can always pay more if we have more time to focus on planning and to make it work better for us. So it's our job to find out whether they're motivated in the speed or the money. And the best way to do this is put two options to them. And then what you're doing is you're making sure that if they're leaning towards one, even if they give you a bit of feedback on it, you tend to be able to proceed much more likely. We've had it time and time again where we've gone in subject planning and it's a no. You're like, well, what do you want? And they don't know, you're not progressing that offer process. Happy to share this offer letter with anyone if they want. So you can either do unconditional, conditional, but if you then can't seal those deals, you can then always go in with a JV or an assisted sale. We find that a JV and assisted sale is probably the last thing you want to be doing, but it's better than not doing the deal at all. And the reason I say it's probably the last thing is because you're sort of joint venturing with someone that you may not have worked with before. So that's pretty much the offer process and how you compile that offer letter with the tabs that we've set up in our stack. If anyone wants to, touch over that again, of course, I'm happy to, and sort of show you how that works. And the most common question I personally get asked, second to how do you find deals, so this is probably the second most question I get asked, is what do you do if it doesn't work on a stack? Because I'm telling you now, 99% of deals that you will stack will not work if you just take a standard information filling process. And what I mean by that is taking all the headline figures, putting it into a spreadsheet, adding all your costs, and it just won't work. When Saul joined us on board, we were looking at a few deals, and I said to, we got an early one, which looks pretty good. And I was like, I've never seen a deal this early have this much profit in it. And it was like 8% on GDV. I was like, we normally have to, squeeze, push, pull, extend it, change the access, do loads of creative stuff to make it work. So one key thing is I always get asked, what do you do if it doesn't work on a spreadsheet? And it's almost just as important to stacking a deal with the process you do next. So what we do, and we do quite a lot, is we take a summary box. So we take the headline figures, so they haven't got every detail of your spreadsheet. We take a summary and we just say, look, this doesn't work. And we tend to go with I call it naive approach, but it's actually quite intelligent approach, where you just say, have we missed anything here? Because they may come back and say, oh yeah, you also get this part of the site, or I think your build costs are too high, or, you're sort of opening a conversation and saying, look, what have we missed here? We can't get this to work. What have we missed? And we've heard all sorts back from agents, but at least it's more information. We want that information from them. It also tends to manage their expectations. One thing you have to remember about an agent is you may buy more than one property off them. The person selling it is likely to only sell one property through them. So you're the client here. So work with the agent to try and push it through. So once you've tried to manage expectations, if you can't change the price, change the terms. So put into your stack, create a new tab and be like, right, if I have to pay this guy this money, or this owner this money, or whoever it may be, what else can I do to make this deal work? It may be completely rejig the way you're building it, completely rejig who's funding it. They may fund it. So go, okay, we'll pay you 700 grand, but we want to defer 500 until the day that we sell the last unit. what does that do for your finance costs? So that's a change that you've tweaked elsewhere. If you can't, so second to that, also if you can't change the price, so the terms is more timelines, structure, JVing sort of thing. If you can't change the price and the term changing doesn't work, how can you change the build, the exit, the use class, the finance, the planning, the joint venture? What else can you change? So there's obviously so many things that we can change as a developer, and it's all about understanding what you can change and manipulate to make sure the deal can go ahead. I will add a caveat in this. Sometimes the expectations are just ridiculous, and it's sometimes best to just draw their expectations down and move on. The way that we best manage expectations is a gross development value, pound per square foot rate, and if it's exceeding, what it's worth, then you always need to move on from that. One thing we have quite a strong view in is always sort of leave a physical or verbal offer on everything that you stack. If you've spent the time on that stack and you know at what price it works and it's close to what they're looking for, by all means leave a formal offer on the table that comes via an offer letter, and make sure that they know that you're still interested, just in case their situation changes or circumstances change. If it's quite an embarrassing figure, that you don't necessarily want to put on paper and maybe in this instance prevent that agent from sending you more stuff, because it might seem these guys are pretty lowbally, I don't want to send them more stuff. Just sort of like teeter around what you're looking at. So for example, Saul and I had one the other day. Expectations were 1.1 million. We were about 800k. We sort of said, this doesn't work unless it's well under $1 million. Just leave it at that, because then if it's below $1 million, they come back to you, they open up the conversation, and you may be able to structure a deal. So always,
Jack, quickly. Yep. So you said if that's an embarrassing offer, then would you put what you just said in writing then?
No, verbally. So
okay.
So in that instance,
we've got a case scenario of that right now. There's one that we looked at. It was just a plot of land in London, and you could build a 1-unit dwelling on it. But with build costs and finance costs, it just doesn't. When you reverse engineer to find out what the land price is, it just doesn't work. And what would work, the price that would work, is 50% of what they're asking. And so I wouldn't want to put that in writing, because it could be misinterpreted the wrong way. Whereas if you actually phone them and have a chat with the agent, you can sort of quickly get a feel as to whether or not, the likelihood is it's not going to be agreeable off the bat, but at least you're sort of building the rapport with the agent to show that you've actually done the due diligence and put the time in. Because sometimes that deal might not work, but you've got the reputation with the agent that you've built in that one instance that might pay for itself later on down the line.
Yeah, with most agents I have a very, very, very good relationship with. I just go in hard and fast at what level it works, because I know that they know I buy stuff and we're active. If I don't have a good relationship with them, I'll do exactly like Saul said. Use it as a point to boast about how much time you've put into it, how consistent they've been with getting information and helping you. We can't get this one to work. We think this is for someone that can build out a single unit cheap. What else can you send to us? So it's exactly like Saul said, and that's a really good question actually. But if I've got a really good relationship with the agent, I'll just straight up say, look, it's worth this to a developer. We've either got to stop marketing it as a development, or they've got to change their attitude on what the price is going to be. Good question, Bushra. Always follow up if you're unsuccessful in the bidding process. So where I say, if you've done all the work, offer on it. So make sure you leave a door open, or if there's an offer, a formal door open. But one thing that's always key is 1 in 3 offers to exchange fall through. So that means there's 33% chance if you've offered on stuff over the last 12 months, it's become available again. And if you're not always picking up those conversations, you may not get a shot at those deals. And we've got an example at the minute. We offered on an office in December, the 23rd actually, in 2019. I literally flew an email into the agent about a week ago, and it's recently become back available. I'm telling you now that 33% has probably doubled because of COVID-19. So where some people say that it's an opportunity to prosper, it really is. And this building has come back on the market for 25 grand less than it was. So that's about 6% drop in value. And that's just its guide. So we're looking to reoffer on that. When I opened up the conversation, the guy that was dealing with it and dealing with all the interested buyers is furloughed. So now there's just a little pocket of people that know about it, which we don't know how big that is yet. But I can tell you now, it's smaller than when it was on December the 23rd and everyone was chomping at the bit to get a new project in January. So opportunity is there, and you've got to revisit bids. In our previous webinar, which is finding deals and keeping your pipeline full, if you watch that one back, the network and prerequisite pipeline is one of the most key things to find deals. But if anyone else is there struggling to find deals, let me know. I'm happy to, if you watch that video and still have more questions, let me know. And then point number 6, ask other people what their thoughts are. I see time and time again, developers spend so much time on stacking a deal, can't get it to work, and then they just leave it in their Dropbox or Drive and don't do anything with it. If you've done all this work, send it to other people. What have you got to lose? They might come back. They might steal it off you. Who cares? At least something's done with it. If they come back and want to joint venture with you or have some creativity or appreciate that you've put the time in and thought of them, there's 1, a JV maybe there. 2, they might come up with a solution that you can do stuff with. And 3, they might just confirm it was a waste of time and move on, which you need to know. So in any case, we're open to looking at any reviews you've done. And you might be struggling to get cheaper finance, or you might be struggling to scrutinize the build, or you might be struggling to add GDV. And sometimes your business in-house, if it's just you, might not have the facilities to add the creativity to completely, what I like to call scrutinize this to the point where it is worth just moving on. So use people around your network. And if they steal it, they steal it. Like we're not precious over a deal that we can't get to work, because what's the worst going to happen? But we do have a bit of trust that if someone does come back to us, that's a person we'd like to be working with. Can we find a way to structure a deal with them? So that's pretty much a general, evidently you could probably tell, and if we shared our spreadsheet, that we could spend hours talking about stacking deals. In actual fact, 2 Fridays ago, Ben, Saul and I spent about 4 hours stacking a deal. But we're here to have an interactive call and interactive questions. So if you have any questions, fire away, unmute yourself. I'm happy to stop sharing for a second and see if we can unmute and get some conversation going about experiences you may have and common deals you've come across that haven't worked. Or
Bushra's unmuted herself. She's preparing herself for a question.
I'm ready. So I've got a couple of sites in mind. What's the best way to calculate the GDV? Should I speak to a first planner to see what's the best thing that I can do with it, the mix of resi and commercial, before I calculate the GDV?
So
that's the age-old question I think a lot of people have, for me especially, because from a design perspective, is what can I do with this?
Yeah.
A planning consultant will help you sometimes in terms of possibilities and what maybe the local planning policy suggests maybe you can do. But in terms of the creativity and design perspective, you need to speak to someone like myself, architect, a designer, someone that's can think a bit more creatively about what's possible.
I wouldn't have said that's the first port of call though. When a deal sort of gets my attention, before I view it, we'll do like a fag packet stack. So get resi values per square foot in that area, commercial values per square foot in that area, and just sort of roughly analyze what it's worth. And you will probably know, I mean, I'd hope everyone would know on this call, what you have there without planning. You should know because it's on the particulars. What you might get with like a 50-50 chance in your perspective with planning, and then what's really pushing the boundaries with planning. And you've got pound per square foot rates, so you should roughly know then what the GDV is. Then once you viewed it and liked it, and then I would get someone like Ben involved and be like, in actual fact, what can I get in, on this site? You may get them involved pre-viewing, but it all depends on how quick you need to be on that deal. how many you've got to review, because evidently if you've got Ben to look at 10 deals that you're looking at, that's going to be costly for both of you. So I'd have said the initial like fag packet is just, you know, like I said, the tabs, like what's their best case, maybe case, really sort of pushing the boundaries. And then
some of it will come with experience in terms of what's possible. But yeah, I mean, that's part of my role in this business, really, to analyze opportunities and see where the change of use can happen, how it can happen. Can it be permitted development? Does it have to go through full planning? Can we get an extra story on top? Can we change some of the commercial to residential? If you're not experienced in that, then you will need someone like myself to take a look at it and review things.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
I sort of say to add to that, Bushra, I probably have. Go on, finish off.
Sorry, no, it was just thank you. I might actually email you about a couple of things.
Cool. I was just going to add that I'm sort of probably in a similar position to you, Bushra. I'm not an architect, and in terms of development and, you know, utilizing a plot of land or an existing site, there's a limited ability for me to sort of see the maximum. So it depends on the complexity of the site. So Ben and Jack have obviously given sort of two views of it. Jack saying, you know, do the back of the fag packet and get that GDV by
Going.
And try and do. Yeah. So essentially, you know, I will
losing you.
do what Jack.
Sounds like he's singing.
I'm never sure if it's me or the other person.
I think it's me.
Yeah, we missed a lot of that.
Yeah, you're pretty glitchy. Hopefully Saul might come back round, and
Okay.
but yeah, in principle, you know, evidently there's different forms of. Saul, I think you're back now.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. We'll see how we get on. Just I'll be brief just before it cuts me off again. I do what Jack does initially to really just, you know, get those comparables and find the GDV roughly, and you've got an idea of what the site might be able to do. Because, you know, if I did what Ben said, which was sort of involve him, or you know, if I didn't have a Ben in the business, I'd need to go to another planning consultant or architect. As they both say, it'd be quite costly and time consuming to do. So there's a balance between both. You know, you phone the agents or get the comps yourself to find out what you could maximize the site for in your own opinion, and then when you think it's got legs, dig a little deeper, speak to an architect or planning consultant. But I think generally, if a site's relatively straightforward, you'd probably be able to get a good idea of what the max, you know, if it's a 1 unit site, you're not going to be building 5 stories necessarily unless there's precedent. So there's sort of, yeah.
I think it's to conclude, I think it's a fine balance between, if the deal doesn't work, you don't want to use up your finance or your favors on professionals. Yeah. If the deal does work, you do want to get to that point where you know more about the site than anyone else to put the best foot forward.
Okay.
Is that it from you, Bushra?
Yeah, that's fine for now. I don't take too much of everyone's time.
I'm intrigued. What does everybody else use other than Google Docs?
I
use stacking.
G Drive.
Calculator. I guess it's fundamental. Does anybody use anything other than Google Sheets or Excel?
There are a few stacking softwares out there, aren't they, and platforms, but yeah. I really don't know many people that use those. The good old spreadsheet just seems to do the business.
Yeah.
Everyone's is so different as well. You know, you get stacks from other developers, and you've got to figure out what field is calculating which cell and rework it, and it's a nightmare. But
that's actually one thing we haven't touched on in this presentation. Never rely on someone else's stack.
Yeah.
Always put it into your own. Always use someone else's stack because it's useful, and it tends to save you quite a lot of time and make you understand where they're coming from. But always finalize everything with your own stack.
Louise, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, has anyone used that Val app, that Uber chap who keeps
No.
I did. I had a meeting with Uber, and we reviewed the software. I mean, I haven't sat down with Ben and Jack and given them a demo, but we've put a lot of work into our spreadsheet, and it's very customizable for scenarios. And I think, you know, there's a learning curve with any piece of software, and I think it would be hard to sort of comment on detail on that software because I've not really used it in depth, but part of me sort of thinks that we've got the functionality that we need. Why change it?
It's constantly evolving as well, isn't it?
I also don't think anyone else does the scenarios that we do, because I've seen really, really comprehensive spreadsheets from people that only do PD, office to resi. Now, their assumption is we're taking every square foot of this building. We get planning on every square foot, and we have to, it's a race to the top who gets the best price. So those spreadsheets, it's all on one page. It never changes. Ours, we don't know. We don't know what we're going to get in planning. You know, like Ben mentioned, we go through scoping report, pre-application, full planning before we know what we've got. And planning is one of the biggest profit multipliers. And for us to do that, we have to go with like scenarios and make sure that we're protecting our, you know, the foot forward we put is not subject to getting this planning, but it's dealing with what we've got there without a planning in play. So I don't think, I'm not entirely sure. I think what Saul's got at, ours is so functional for us that if we went onto someone else's spreadsheet or platform, it would actually work that well, unless it was just really quick at compiling comps, which we're still yet to find the best way to do that.
Sounds like your approach is very rich and layered and builds in the scenario planning, as you say, that some of these other apps might not do. So, yeah.
Yeah, because we look at things generally fairly creatively, so we have to run the different scenarios for different circumstances. So we've got a completely different finance option for when we're speaking to a vendor directly on an assisted sale basis. So we've got to run different financial models as part of that process. If we're looking at one at the moment, which is mixed use commercial, conversion at the rear, potentially airspace development, do we split some of the bigger flats into smaller flats? There's so many moving parts that a very rigid stack analyzer just doesn't really cut the mustard. Like you've got to, it's ever changing and ever evolving, and very specific to each project. So it has to be quite dynamic.
But that said, I'd never dissuade from anyone looking at software, because if it works for you, it works for you, and if it helps your business, then that's great. But you know, you don't know unless you have a look, sort of thing, I guess.
Yeah.
And maybe it's something more for beginners rather than more experienced developers like yourselves. You know, maybe it might help someone starting out who's not really quite sure what all the different margins and indicators and variables ought to be.
Sure, yeah.
So for single lets or HMOs, we use a spreadsheet that was shared with us, just a nice box spreadsheet where it's not too interchangeable and it's quite straightforward.
Yeah, well, when you get to development level, there's a lot more moving parts that need to be taken into account. You can use a relatively simple stack to analyze buy-to-lets and HMOs. As soon as you start adding development works in there and all the different moving parts, it's a different beast.
There we go. Any other questions about stacking?
Yeah, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Do you guys, what do you hi Ben, by the way, nice to speak to you again.
You're right.
What do you use as a rule of thumb for professional fees? Because obviously, as you say, there's a broad scope, and do you have like some that are based per square footage and then certain fixed ones on top, or how do you do it?
It'll really depend on the size of the project. Typically, if in any development we're looking at, professional fees in total come to more than about 15% of the build costs, I'd start to worry. In terms of sort of architects' fees, and this again varies on the size of the project, because the percentage that you pay as a contract value to a 200 grand project will be far higher than a percentage on a £2 million project. You might be spending 5% in total on a £2 million project. That's for like full architectural service start to finish. Whereas on a £200,000 project, it may even be 15%, because actually the amount of work that you still need to put in for that smaller scheme as a percentage is going to be higher. But yeah, sort of maximum 15% for any scheme for all professional services is sort of like where I'd bottom out on. And then anywhere between 7 and that 15%.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Cheers.
So I've got a spreadsheet up in front of me here. If it requires planning, we have our own box, which is energy sap assessment, bat surveys, tree surveys, basement impact access, flood risk, construction management, daylight, CTIs, geotechnic engineer in a box. And then obviously if we're looking at something, it does need planning, we'll pull that into the pre-planning professional fees. So we have specific case boxes, pre-planning, post-planning. Like Ben said, there are some percentage rules within our spreadsheet, but most of them are just like off fees for planning consultant and topographical survey and things like that. Which
the more you do, the more templated you can become on those fees, because you'll get to understand the range of types of that survey I know will cost us about 450 quid. If we need to do an energy report for a planning application, it'll cost us about 600 quid. We sort of, I guess the more you do of it, the more experience you can draw from. But coming back to sort of the design side of things, it really will vary. And I know I'm biased, but you get what you pay for when it comes to design fees. So if you want to spend a lot less, you're probably not going to be working with someone that's willing to push the boundaries a bit and try and get you the maximum.
Cool. Thanks for that.
Ben, would you recommend getting a planner or architect that's local in the area that you're looking at?
Not necessarily. It can help. I do bring in a planning consultant to work with me when I'm working on developments in Lambeth, because he used to work for them for 10 years. So for me, there is that like inside kind of experience, which I think does add a bit of value. Not a huge amount, if I'm honest, but enough to make me want to bring him in. Realistically, planning law is planning law, and any planning consultant should be able to deal with any borough in the UK, really. So it doesn't make too much difference, but it can sometimes help to have a bit of inside knowledge.
Any other questions? No? Cool. We've got a couple more slides and then we can tie off with any other questions and hopefully let you all get to back to your day, because it's quite nice and sunny outside. We'll try and find where this. Cool. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Loading. Yep.
So just to tie it all off, thanks very much for joining us first off, but we've got a few events and things that you may be interested in hearing more about. So I'll pass over to Saul for this one.
Jack. So yeah, obviously we've looked at the stacking side and making those offers. So obviously the natural next step in the process would be to look at how to optimize the design. Sort of touched on it towards the end here, and obviously achieving successful planning. So obviously that's a key sort of stepping stone to achieving that delivery and sales. So join us on the 7th of July, same time, same day, 3 p.m. And I can paste the link in the chat actually, but you can also email us as well.
Yeah, it would be great if people wanted to bring some live case studies to talk through as well. We'll have some things to show and things to discuss. But if you do have a specific project that you're looking at, you want some design input, it's a great opportunity to have a live debate where everyone can learn from that discussion.
Brilliant. And you should be notified if you subscribe through the Eventbrite link, because it's through EXP's Eventbrite.
Yeah. One other thing that we're looking to bring out over the next couple of months, predominantly when we get out of lockdown, but it's a monthly boardroom session. So we're looking for 10 people to get involved. I find these types of events priceless, really, where you're sharing value, sharing knowledge, sharing contacts. You're discussing live examples of things you're looking at. You're getting different perspectives from different people with different backgrounds. And you know, I'm a member of Candor Property Club. I know Jack's a member of a monthly mastermind in London with a lot of other investors and developers. And there's so much value that comes out of these types of sessions. So if you do want to be part of ours, please register your interest at that email address. We'd love to have you on board, and you know, really push forward us as developers, as a collective, make sure everyone's doing things successfully and safely, really, because there's a lot of bad advice out there, really. And we want to try and improve the way that, I guess, property education is seen, and do things well. So yeah, please register your interest if you'd like to discuss it more.
And thanks, Ben. Then finally, to conclude, at the beginning of lockdown and our predictions of stress in the market, distress in the market, we've always had really good deal flow, and our investor partnership structure has never really been that formalised. So we're launching the EXP partnership program, which just builds a bit more meat around the bones of what we may be able to do together. This is the front page of our brochure, so if you do want the brochure, let us know. It's free for anyone to just have a look, and if you just want to have a browse, then that's also fine. But it basically details how you can potentially work with us, and I think it's key that that's on paper, purely because we don't want it to be haphazard. We want to make sure that all the values are in line, and like I said, we've got some good opportunities in our pipeline that we want to make sure we're partnering with the right people. So with all of the above, just drop us a note to our email address. So the webinar in 2 weeks, boardroom session, which EXP are starting off. Some of that is dictated by lockdown and when that's relieving. Ideally, we would like to kick off at least the first few months face-to-face, but we may look to sort of dry run it online, and the EXP partnership program. And that's it. That's all our contact details. I've said that we can share slides, so we can share these slides. We can share our offer template. We can share our property CVs. We can share our business design and build CV. We can share the brochure from the EXP partnership. Or if you want to try our stacking nous and maybe test our creativity on anything, do let us know. We like helping people around us and working with nice people. So, yeah, get in contact.
Yeah, thanks everyone.